It.
Wait for it. Wait for it. And we're live. It's almost like they've heard this before. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blast from the Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun into its function. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in. So first off, this is what happens when you have too much coffee. You mess up the script you've done a billion times. But if we pre-recorded it, you wouldn't get those funny mess ups when they do happen. So you're welcome, people. We do it for you. All right, with that being said, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. We've got Miss Janice J.A. Andrews. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, and then once I'm done, I got to disappear because I just realized I need to find my plug, and it's not where I thought it was. I'm J.A. Andrews. I write epic fantasy, Keeper Chronicles, Keeper Origins, lots of Keeper things. Keepers are bookish, librarian, mages, storytellers, people like that. And a big fan of dragons. So, yeah, glad to be here.
Everybody loves the dragons. And while you look for the plug, we're going to let Miss Jana J.S. Brown, or Jenna Ray, or whatever personality she brought with us today.
Hi, guys. I'm Jana S. Brown. I also write under Jenna Ray. That's where all my speculative fiction lives at. I write fantasy, urban fantasy, science fiction. Under another pen name, I write all the smoochy stuff, and that may come up because we're talking dragons today, and there's definitely something romantic about dragons.
Absolutely. I mean, who doesn't want to hug a dragon? All right, next. You volunteer as tribute? Okay, next we have Miss Sarah K. Wilson.
Hi, I'm Sarah K. L. Wilson. I write a variety of fantasy and young adult fantasy, and my YA fantasy has a lot of dragons, which is why I'm here today. I live in Northern Ontario in Canada with a bunch of animals and some kids. Mine.
The animals or the kids?
Both.
Although I think those are the same thing, basically. Animals, kids. I mean, I got a couple myself. I get it. I think the dogs are easier to tame, though.
Yeah, we had turkeys. They're a little bit harder to tame.
Yes, indeed. But delicious.
They do taste good. And last but not least, we have the many voices of Terry K. Job.
Hello, darling. I just remembered I was supposed to be Natasha today. I'm Terry K. Job, baby author and audiobook narrator and a voice person. Yes.
Oh, freaking standing. All right. And with that being said, we're going to tell you how we first met them. Actually, true story, they were actually my writing instructors at Dragon University. There was another professor or another teacher, Professor Cross, but sadly she got eaten by a dragon, so she couldn't make it today. And with that, a moment of silence, please. All right, that's over. And now the religion questions. Jokes aside, Katie introduced us to Janice and to Sarah. And so when we did dragons, of course, we had to have them on. And since we're doing dragons, the religion questions will be a little bit different today. So, Dragonheart, damsel or Aragon? All right, Terry, you're going to go first since nobody jumped in.
Go if you're ready, Sarah. Go for it.
All right. I would pick Dragonheart because it's the only one I've seen. Sadly, I read a lot of books, but don't watch a lot of television or movies, and I really did like Dragonheart.
It is a good one. So, all right, Terry, since I asked you, you get to go next. No pressure.
Cool. I already had my answer, actually. I was thinking about this long and hard. Dragonheart was very good. Even a couple of the sequels were okay, and I liked them, even if they went downhill after a while. But the first couple were good. But I also have a very soft spot for the Inheritance cycle, of which Aragon was the first film. The film was, the books are outstanding. And I still need to read the newest one that Paolini wrote. I'm a little behind.
Life happens. We get it.
Yeah.
All right. Jana. So, Dragonheart, damsel or Aragon?
Oh, you already know that Sean Connery is my boo. So, I have to go with Dragonheart. Damsel was good. I think it was fun. It wasn't amazing going to make my top 10 list forever, but it was fun. Aragon really didn't do much for me, so I got to stick with Dragonheart.
Damsel was definitely a popcorn kind of movie. I mean, it was fun, but I wouldn't watch it again.
Right. It was fun once, but once all the surprises are out, then it's like, okay, that was a thing.
Yeah. All right. And Janice, what about you? Dragonheart, Damsel, or
So I haven't seen Damsel, and I was going to, but that actually, now I just know what mood I need to be in before I watch that one. I think I'm gonna have to go with Dragonheart also because again, the Aragon, I only saw the movie, and it was So I think it's another vote for Dragonheart. Yeah.
I put that in there because I know her affinity for that actor. So but I don't want to forget you, Nick. So what about you?
I'm gonna go with an alternative answer. I'm gonna go with the Decimation of Smog.
Oh,
Okay,
that's
there's that.
great. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I love Rain of Fire. I love Dragons.
Hey! That's the next question. You shut your mouth.
Damn, they don't pay me enough for this type of stuff.
I'll double your salary. You're good. So for me, it'd be Dragonheart as well because I like the classics. All right, and because we're polytheistic, we're going to ask the second question. So, Dragon Hunter, Dragon Slayer, or Rain of Fire? And Nick, since you already weighed in, I'm going to let you answer first.
I love Rain of Fire. I think it's such a fun movie. I love the dragons existed, and then we rediscover them because we forgot about them, and there's just chaos everywhere. And Matthew McConaughey was just awesome.
So it is like
so over the top.
It's almost like a religion for Nick. Somebody says dragons, and he says, "Have we talked about Rain of Fire with you?" It's like he's going door to door to talk to people about it. That's how.
Oh, I will too, and I'll wear a white shirt with a dragon tie, and I will have the Decimation of Smog and a copy of Rain of Fire. Like if I talk to you about my Lord and Savior, the dragons.
Basically. All right, Terry. What about you?
Well, I'm also going to say Rain of Fire, in part because I've only seen that one of the three, and two, because it's a good movie, and I love making fun of the fact that the dragons fly on Swiss cheese wings. It shouldn't work.
Magic.
They didn't.
Magic.
The avionics is not avionic. It doesn't make sense.
No. And they do a pretty good rendition of Star Wars in there, so that's also good.
Yeah, sort of Top Gun Maverick.
What about you, Sarah?
I'm gonna throw in an alternative, and I'm gonna go with How to Train Your Dragon, which I realize is a cartoon and a kids' cartoon, but I loved watching those with my boys. I really think they hold up for the adult audience too. I love those.
Oh, those are great movies.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love those. Those are awesome.
So, full disclosure, Dragon Hunter is also a cartoon. If you were looking for cartoons,
Oh.
That's good. Yeah.
Toothless is
all
my
right, what
spirit
about you,
animal.
Jana?
Yeah, I've got to go with Rain of Fire. That's my favorite out of that particular list. Enough so that I have an upcoming series that is inspired by Rain of Fire.
Oh.
So, absolutely the. Oh yes, yes. Shall we take military and dragons? Oh yes, we shall.
Okay. And next we have Miss Janice. Can you want to weigh in?
So I'm just gonna have to, How to Train Your Dragon. When Sarah brought that up, I was like, yeah, that's actually the right answer. So those are great. All of them, all three movies, great.
Okay. I don't know. So Dragon Slayer came out the year I was born, so it's kind of like, I watched it as a kid, so I'm going with that one. But Rain of Fire was good. I have seen it. So, all right.
I feel old now. Thanks, JR.
Were you busy in
Born in
81?
like 92 or something?
I think so. I don't know. I think she's messing with us because, All right. So now that we got those out of the way, because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Waves podcast and no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes, coffee or tea, and how do you take it, Janice?
So coffee, although I kind of swore off coffee like at the beginning of the year, and it actually has been really great. But I do love it and I miss it. But definitely coffee over tea, absolutely.
Oh, I don't know that I could swear it off. I'm not that strong-willed.
Yeah, I didn't think I was, but then we gave it a try for a week or two, and just I felt a lot better. So I've way cut back on the coffee.
Okay. And what about you, Sarah?
Coffee by the gallon with cream.
Absolutely, I could dig that. How do I take it? Very seriously. And since we have asked Jana and Terry this question ad nauseum, because they're frequent flyers here at the Blasters and Blades, we're going to move on to the second part of this question. So, because we're talking about dragons, do you think dragons are going to do tea with you or coffee or something else? What do you think a dragon's going to drink? And we're going to go to you first, Terry.
Well, my initial thought is Fireball. Because dragon.
Well, most alcoholics call that cinnamon.
Fair. But if it was one of the two, coffee or tea, I'd say probably coffee.
Okay. What about you, Jana?
Okay, so back in college, we used to make something called toxic sludge, and it started with plum or prune juice, a bunch of soda, and then you would float giant chunks of sherbet in it. And this is what we did. And it was kind of amazing. And somebody put Red Hots in it at one point because it was really late at night and we were really dumb. And that was the most dragonish drink I've ever seen because it was purple with this green floating on top. And when you drank it, you lit yourself on fire. It was amazing. And so if I was going to serve something up to a dragon, it would be a full vat of toxic punch.
That is diabetes in a bowl.
Oh, again, college. I can't eat that way anymore. But back then, when my metabolism was fully revved, it was a thing.
Okay, that sounds interesting. If you try it and you live, dear listener, let us know. If you don't live, we're sorry, but don't sue us.
Not my fault.
Sarah, what about you? What do you think the dragon's going to give you?
I think I would serve a dragon a double shot of espresso because a powerful beast requires a powerful drink and possibly a dark roast. Maybe the dragon could roast it for me and for himself.
Oh, on the spot, right there. With his nostril.
I like it.
That's right. Done.
Janice, what about you? What do you think a dragon's going to drink?
I think definitely coffee, but like it might be really great because he would drink the coffee when it was like so blazing hot that I like want to drink it, but it's killing me. And so like he could take this like deal with it for a little while. Not that I'm gonna like drink out of the same cup as the dragon, but he could take the first cup, and I'll take another one when it's cool.
Okay. What about you, Nick? What do you think?
I got two things going on in my brain right now. One, mead,
Okay, I'm with you. Go on.
The whole Viking thing. Also, I think they would like their coffee a little Irish. You know what I mean? A little Jameson in there.
I'm picking up what you're laying down. I got you. I'm tracking like a VCR.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. In my head, I'm picturing like the dragons is all prim and proper. So, like they're drinking tea out of a cup with their pinky in the air at noon. And it still amazes me to this day when it was 145 degrees outside in the middle of the desert and the Brits stopped at noon to have tea. And I'm like, sir, be civilized. It's hot. Here's some cold water. But nope. They said the Queen wouldn't approve, so they didn't drink the cold water. They drank the hot tea. But anyway, so for whatever reason in my head, basically the dragons are sweet British people. So, and they would probably take it NATO style, so like 2 cubes of sugar and 2 dashes of the milk. I think that's
might be a spot of honey.
Oh, maybe. See, now we've got to do all the dragons instead of Scottish accents like everyone does dwarves. Now, like dragons have to have British accents, but posh British.
Have you read Naomi?
Dragon with a Londoner accent. Oh my god, that would drive me insane.
What were you saying, Sarah?
Have you read Naomi Novik's Temeraire series? Because they do have the British dragons with the British accents, and they do drink an enormous amount of tea. The dragons do.
That is awesome. See, I knew I was onto something.
Good series. Really, really good series.
Good
We will
spot
have
of
to track
tea.
them down right into the show.
His wings.
All right, so with that out of the way, we've done our introduction. We've had a lot of fun. Now let's get to the serious business of dragons. So the first question is, why do you think that everyone likes dragons so much? Because that's the one topic that can almost unify any nerd out there is dragons are cool.
They're big flying lizards that breathe fire, usually, and have wings. What's not to love? Even if they eat you. Yes.
That's not cool when they eat you. And they're cool.
It's cool for them.
It's cool if you can let them eat your enemies.
That's
I think part of it is that people have always wanted to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because we've always wanted to fly, the idea that you'd have like an ability to fly, and it would be your friend, like your dog. But everyone has that like a pet they adored. That it would be like your pet that you adored, and you could fly. It like fascinates people, I think.
I dig it.
And also it's like this apex predator too that can fly, but is also your friend, but could destroy like your enemy's whole village if you needed to.
It's like you met my dog at one point.
Well, and they come in such a range because I mean you're talking about the pet my dog style, which is definitely a thing, but on the other side, they're terrifying. You know, they are a great villain because you've got nearly invulnerable hide, you've got the fire, you've got all of those things. So they also make this really, really great, very natural kind of villain space, or at least antagonist space. Because sometimes you get, you know, the thing where they're not even a villain, but they are a distinct antagonist. So I love that it's something that really, really runs the gamut. And you can have good, you can have bad, you can have intelligent, you can have non-intelligent. There is so much space to play when it comes to dragons.
Mm-hmm. And I think that whole reptilian idea, like it can be like a really vicious, creepy, like emotionless reptile, or it can be the How to Train Your Dragon ones that are almost like more like mammals, right? Like they're almost like doggy kind of reptiles. So I think there's such a scope that you can have of the different.
And it's the fire too. Like people are obsessed with fire, right? Like whether as a tool, or we love fireworks, or we like lighting things on fire. And so the fact that they also have the fire going on, I think, is a big draw.
I mean, it makes s'mores very easy. Like you just bring it with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Well,
why you
and
have a
there's
dragon
history
friend
behind
for campouts.
that's true for campouts. There's history behind it too. Almost every culture has a dragon mythos. And they're different depending on the culture, and so that's why you get different styles of dragons, you get wyverns, you get all this kind of thing. But there is enough history there that you have to question what it is that these different cultures have encountered that all comes into dragon myths. And the things that are the same, the things that are different, you know, all of those kinds of things. And so I think that's part of why, as we write fantasy and we go into other stories, there's even more things we're curious about because, you know, St. George and the Dragon, was that really a thing? Was it a dragon? Was it a worm? Was it an iguana? We don't know. And so we're naturally curious.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably true. I think the fact that everyone has the idea of it is it's probably at one point in time there was something that looked vaguely dragon-esque. That was a predator in their region, and stories sort of went from there. And you know, like the game of telephone where it distorts along the way. I've heard one theory that said that the dragon myth started with crocodiles, which you know, that makes sense as it grows. And then
I've been to Florida. They're huge.
Yep.
Them wings, they're extra scary.
And I was the kid when we did the game of telephone that would intentionally mess it up just for grins and giggles. So you know, throughout history, there's been other people like me to take the message a little bit farther. Yes, Nick,
I've also heard the theory that some of the dragon mythos in different places came from finding dinosaur bones and just not understanding what a dinosaur is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dragon.
Yeah, dragon.
Yeah.
Not that far off either.
No.
So we've talked about why
I draw my dragons with feathers. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we've talked about why dragons are cool, but then you've got the next idea, which is the topic of today's panel, pimping your ride dragon style. So why does the idea of dragons as mounts, as horses, as your ride, right, your steed, why do you think that is so appealing? It's been done a lot for a reason.
It's want to fly. It's the need of flight, seeing the birds in the sky. And then the imagination creeps in. You're like, what would it be like if I couldn't fly myself, if I could ride something that could fly?
Mm-hmm.
And people get really attached to their mounts, right? Like there's like the horse people, they adore their horses, they're like super obsessed with them, or the car guys, they're like totally into their vehicle. I think there's just something about there being like this personal transportation thing that not only does it open up all these opportunities for cool stories for in the fantasy world, but like people can imagine how much fun it would be to go to their job they don't like very much on a dragon instead of in a car, or to go to school and meet all their friends on a dragon instead of on the school bus. And I don't know, I think it ignites the imagination because you think, I could do that. I could totally do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, if I showed up to work on a dragon, that'd be awesome. That's more pimp than a hell. Like you ride in a helicopter, you're like, yeah, that's cool, but check it out. I got a dragon. It breathes fire.
Dragon.
All
Well,
right.
and a
We,
lot of the stories you have that bond with them. So sometimes it's telepathy, sometimes you're talking to
Mm-hmm.
them, but you always have that bond, and the dragon and the writer go together. And so it's not just a mount, it's not just something that you ride. I mean, I ride in my car, but I don't love my car the way that I think I would love my dragon companion. That would be a
Well,
completely different thing to say this
yeah,
is
and
this intelligent
you see
being
that
that I'm
in
part
movies like Avatar, where they
of.
rode dragons, essentially, and they had that connection, you know, um, mechanically almost, even though it was organic. Their braid attached to their braid, and then boom, you had that neural handshake. Now I'm genres and franchises.
It's all good.
Crossing the streams there,
Yeah,
dude.
I think that crossing the streams, dude.
so I think there's got to be a
Sometimes you got to
rule on
cross the
this.
streets. Ego said that.
There's got to be a rule for you, Nick, that when we talk about Avatar, you have to specify which one, because you've talked about the blue people Avatar, you've talked about like Last Airbender Avatar. They can't even just like specify which one
I'm
you're
not a
talking
big fan of anime, so just know that if I'm talking about Avatar, I'm talking about the blue people.
about. Okay. All right.
I ain't trying to butter or nothing.
I'm just saying I want that mech suit.
That's
We've all
true.
got dreams. All right. So
But
Well,
we've
what do you
talked
think?
going back to the so going back to the question, I think another good reason would be having a dragon mount would be better than a horse, because a horse is a prey animal. And you get all these, videos and stories of riding a horse go along, and all of a sudden the horse sees its shadow and goes, "Oh my god, no." And you're around on your butt. Whereas a dragon, they say, "Oh, there's a Ferrari. We're fine. Go away." Ugh." So riding a predator animal as opposed to a prey one, there's that extra.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't say that.
We got you. We know what we're not going to say. What about you, Janice? Why do you think that the idea of riding the dragon is so cool that so many people have done it?
I don't know, but I was just thinking about how often when I've seen it, there's been like the telepathy sort of connection, but also it seems like there's this like super duper connection. Like so many of the stories, like if the rider dies, the dragon will die, or vice versa, or like if you keep living, like half of your soul is gone. Like there's this insane connection that people make, which I think, yeah, like we were talking about earlier, like your favorite pet. Like none of us could ride our dog, and the dog never really talked back to us, even if we're like, I know you understand me. But I feel like there's a sense of, yeah, it's being bigger, stronger,
Dog
faster,
not
it
in for
flies.
me.
So I'm pretty sure there have been some movies where the dragon actually puts part of its heart into the human rider almost to make the connection. So yeah, that connection, I think, is there. It's also, in a lot of, the fantasy, that idea that you can be that close to some other animal that no one else can. I think that, I'm cooler than you because factor, I think, is there too.
Yeah, that's a major part of Aragon and the inheritance cycle. That's of all the things that I have read and watched that are dragon rider related, that is the closest bond that I have seen. It is one of those situations that Janice mentioned where if the rider dies, the dragon dies, not necessarily vice versa, but that each other's thoughts, even if you don't necessarily want to all the time. And it's a deep, intimate connection.
Well, and along that, I mean, I was joking about the romance thing, but dragon shifters are really, really popular, and they're played in lots and lots of different ways. But, because we talk about dragon riders, and there are stories where it's a case of, yes, they're a shifter, and they'll shift into their dragon form, and their partner, who's usually their romantic partner, will also be their rider in the non Teehee innuendo way. So you get a lot of that where it's a human-like bond, except it's with this very powerful creature.
Okay, but if they're shifters, when they go to their human form, where does that extra mass go?
We don't discuss the mass problem with shifters. It's magic.
Okay.
And it does depend, because in some cases they end up being very small dragons, which I thought was kind of adorable. To have cute little 6 foot tall dragons was kind of hysterical and really kind of cute. The writing gets really hard at that point because the ratios are wrong. But the 6 foot tall dragon shifter was really cute.
Okay, so before we dive in deeper, because I know we're about to get off to the races with the next question, I'm going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man, and then we'll jump right back in.
A newly minted PhD, Noah Parker is thrilled to land a dream job at the hottest tech company in the American Southwest, genetically engineering new lines for their feature product, living, breathing dragons. Desperate to create the perfect family pet, Reptilian Corp hopes to put a dragon in every home. But with his newfound access to the company's resources, Noah has a secret goal: modify the dragon's genetic code, bending them to another purpose entirely. Domesticating Dragons by Dan Cobalt and BaneBooks.com.
So now that we've got that out of the way, we were talking about riding the dragons and what that would look like. So when you see that in fiction, do you like it where that bond is more intimate than just horse and rider, where it's, where they're talking to each other's minds, souls, whatever? Do you think that's necessary for the story to be compelling?
I don't think it's completely necessary for the story. I don't think you need to go as deep as the inheritance cycle does, but it helps to have that in at least an intelligent connection, being able to talk to them verbally or telepathically to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it depends on the story that you've set up. So my daughter is a huge Wings of Fire fan. And everything there is from the dragon's point of view, and humans are called scavengers, and they're tiny and all this, that, and the other. And you have scavengers who are allowed to be dragon riders, but they're seen as pets. And the dragon looks and goes, "Oh, it's so cute! Look at it try to talk! It squeaks all the time." They kind of see them almost as squirrels, and yet they'll still have this. I'm protecting it, and it's allowed to ride around on my shoulders, and I'll even go in the air with it and whatever. So it can work. That there's a bond there, but it's definitely not telepathy. But it's very, very cute. So it depends on what the story is set up, because the way the story has been set up from the get-go, we really understand that this is coming from the dragon's point of view, and this is how they're viewing this. And the writing is a point of safety because the scavengers can't keep up with them. So of course you have to put it on your shoulder and take it for a ride, because otherwise it might get lost or somebody might eat it or other things. And there's one book that is from the human's point of view, where they look at it and they do kind of look at it as a giant horse. It's like, yeah, it's a giant intelligent horse. So they don't have that, but because of the way they've set up the book, it works just fine. So really a lot of that is, how does the book universe or the media universe, whatever it is, how does that have those situations set up? Who's set up as a more dominant species, or are they very equal? A lot of that kind of stuff matters differently as you go, do we need this telepathic bond or not? Or what is the benefit of having that bond?
So before we let anyone else answer that, Sarah just sent me a message. She apologizes. Her Wi-Fi up in where she's at dropped, so she apologizes. Her links, if you want to find out more about what she's written, it does look interesting. There will be in the show notes, so you can track her down as you do on the internet. And go buy her books, leave reviews. You know how that works. And Nick's Starlink doesn't like him today, so it's just the four of us. And with that being said, what about you, Janice? Do you think that mental bond is required, or do you think it's more plot dependent?
First, Sarah's Dragon Rider books for Dragon School, excellent. Just so everyone should go check them out. They're great. But I think the thing that the really close bond puts in it is the loyalty, right? Like the human is climbing on the back of this huge monster thing, right? That's just massive. And when they have a connection, however they manage to put that into the book, I feel like I really like that sense of loyalty that comes in it. Like the human is trusting that the dragon's not just going to dump them off at 10,000 feet. And they just both, there can be all sorts of conflict going on, but when they have that connection, they're going to end up, even if they're not seeing eye to eye, they're ending up on the same team. They're ending up protecting each other. And so I don't know that's essential, but I really do like when that's part of the story.
So that's an interesting question. You mentioned dumping them off. So when you see those, and some of them in the art and whatnot, they're just literally like clamped between the, their thighs on the back and in the back between the wings. And I've seen others where they literally have saddles with seatbelts. So do you have a preference in the aesthetic when you see that, be it art or comic or, shows or books? Like, does it matter to you? Do you want it to be practical, like totally need a seatbelt and stirrups? Or do you want the rule of cool and just, throw them up there?
I think like Janice said, it depends on the story that's being told. Like, I keep going back to Aragon because I really like that series. That's essential. Early in book 1, our protagonist takes a ride on a dragon without that, and his thighs are shredded from that because of the scales, and they're sharp. In other stories, oh yeah, you're fine. And it just depends on the tone that you're setting in the world. So I'm ambivalent, as long as it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. It has to make sense. I do lean towards if you're going to be flying without any kind of protection, there's a lot of problems that come with that. It's not good for your eyes. It's not good for your skin. You could fall off. There's lots of those things. And I do like it
Do a
when
barrel roll.
well, yeah, exactly. But I like it when the author addresses that and goes, okay, hang on. There are some things that we need to do in order to make this make a lot more sense. And some of the books are really fun as they discover that. Pern is that way. When they do Dragon's Dawn and they're on dragons for the first time and they go, okay, you really can't see anything because your eyes start to tear up and it's cold. And so we need better jackets and these. So it allows for building up the plot to say, how can they safely work together? And how are the dragons built? Can we create something that goes with their natural build in order to kind of keep you on? Is it just going to be, the big saddle thing? I've seen one that looked like a Western horse style saddle, and that was ridiculous. I couldn't buy that one. But there's others where they're like, okay, well, if we run straps in this way, so we've got a thing to hold on to and we're buckled into it, that works for me. So I really like it when they think about, this is what dragon anatomy is like. This is what human anatomy is like, because like you say, sitting like that could be really, really uncomfortable. And this is how we can make it work together so that it kind of makes sense. I like watching that process. I think it's interesting. And I think it's another point of bonding very often, is that figuring out, how can I ride you safely without being in pain or blind or too cold or any of those other things.
I've seen one in an image. It was just like somebody was making art where they took the old box setup that was on the backs of elephants in the like the ancient times, and they put one of those on a dragon. Where yeah, so they put that style of, I guess, not really saddle, but that actually kind of makes sense. But I would think it would mess with aerodynamics, so I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the only important question you need to know about riding a dragon is, how do you buzz the tower and what would qualify as a tower? Because you want to do it. Like, do that close up flyby of somebody, something.
Buzz the castle.
Buzz the castle. There we go. That works.
Yeah.
Well, and I've seen people do dragons in space or dragons in science fiction, so you could have a tower.
Yeah. When we were still the Sci-Fi Shenanigans, part of the analyzation at the end was we talked to the author about their reviews, and you realize very quickly that you'll get the same issue and you'll get half the people absolutely love it and half the people absolutely hate it. And it always amused me, like, at the ones that would have science fiction with dragons in space, and I'm like, so breaking your body up into a million particles and beaming it halfway across the galaxy, totally okay. Dragon in space is where you draw the line. Got it. I mean, it's, for me, that's one of those ones where people's lines are always amuses me.
There can be no other giant lizards on any other planet ever. Oh, wait.
All right. So in some worlds, the dragons are sort of like the eternal creature, right? Almost like the memory of the world, the peoples, and they are so long lived. Do you like that trope when it's paired with a dragon rider, or do you want them to have relatively comparable lifespans?
I'm a big fan of dragons being just massive in all forms. I'm actually like my very favorite dragon is Smog, actually, and I know that's like not Dragon Rider, like no one's gonna ride him, but he's just
Only once.
massive and he's smart, yeah. And so I do like the really long lived, and that the concept that they often have of like sort of like ancestral memory, like they just like know all the history of all the dragons that have lived. Just like some of these ideas. Personally, I like that. I like the dragons to be less human and more supernatural, which is wrong for a fantasy world, but I like it when they're really long lived.
Okay. Terry, Jana.
Do it, Terry.
I don't have a problem necessarily with long-lived dragons, but after a point, my logical brain starts to say, "Hey, wait a minute."
This is where she draws the line.
This is where I draw the line. Like, for example, I still use dragons in Dungeons and Dragons, but I can't think about it too hard because it's like, okay, there's an ancient dragon over there. How does this population work? Like, what does that look like? Where do they come from? Like, what's the breeding population here? Especially if you have multiple colors of dragons, as you do. So,
well, when a mommy dragon and a daddy dragon love each other very much, they give each other a special air hug, and from there we get dragon eggs. And if you want more details, I can't do that on this podcast because we have to stay safe for work. But get with me; we'll figure it out.
Noted. But how often do they do that? Like, where are all these other dragons? So I try not to think about it too hard. A medium length of time of lifespan, I think, is kind of my sweet spot. Old more than humans, but not necessarily thousands of years. That just gets a little wonky for me.
I mean, as long as they hibernate to give. Have you seen Stargate Atlantis, where they have the wraith that sort of hibernates so they don't overhunt the humans?
Never actually watched Stargate. Don't hate me.
Well, nobody's perfect, but I like that kind of concept because you see dragons a lot of times they will hibernate in a lot of fiction, and I started thinking, well, why would you do that? It makes sense so you don't overhunt an area, because if you're
and that helps
eat a lot.
Yeah, that takes care of a lot of my issues. Oh, they're going to hibernation for centuries? Okay, that's fine. I can handle that.
Yeah. And I also, along with it, I was thinking I kind of like my dragons rare. So like unlike How to Train Your Dragon, where there's just like a bajillion of them everywhere. Like I do kind of like them rare, which then they can be older and longer lived because they're not populating the earth quickly.
Well, and I think we often like the trope of the dragons being younger simply because we're going on the ride usually with the rider. And so we want to see the rider's introduction to the dragon, how and why they bond. We kind of want to see them growing up together per se, because you think about a lot of the really classic dragon rider books like Pern and things like that. They impress from the time of eggs. Then there's this growing period. They go through the cycles of mating cycles and all of this, that, and the other. And so we're seeing our protagonist grow with the dragon. And that is not impossible to do when they're introduced to an ancient being, but it's a lot harder because now you've got to make this connection between someone who is younger, relatively young, with something that is thousands of years old, and you have to figure out why they're connecting. And that's a slightly different story than what we often tell with dragon riders, because with dragon riders, we're often telling an action adventure story. So I think that's why we very often see that, even though in other dragon usage, we do see the older dragons, the hibernating dragons. We actually see dragons with harems a lot. And so you'll get one. This is what Rain of Fire did, where it's got the one male and then the females. And so you have to have that balance in order to get a breeding population. But that's not an important point in a dragon rider story, because we're very often telling that relationship story. So we want them to feel very relatable to each other. So if you've got a young man and a young dragon, that's now a boy and his dog story, except exploded to the nth degree. So I think that's why we see a lot of it and why we gravitate a lot to the dragons kind of aging with their riders, is because that's the story we're wanting to tell, and that's a lot harder to do when you've got that huge age gap.
Well, I mean, you could do it. It just changes the power imbalance, I would think.
Yeah, it's a different kind of story. So it's
Mhm.
doable. I've read some, but it's just a very different kind of story when you're making that relation versus the two of them really growing up and going on adventures together and saving the world.
So do you like the ones, so presuming that they have the longer lived dragons and you're meeting the dragon in its youth, would you want it then to preserve the life of its human rider as well? So the human rider gets a little extra longevity for that bond, or then you cycle through that process where the dragon has multiple riders throughout its life?
I
Yeah.
like both. They're
I,
different stories and they're interesting
Mm-hmm.
because you do
Mm-hmm.
get that, does it start bothering the dragon that they've gone through multiple riders? Does that become a thing? Or is that it's the Doctor Who question of with every iteration we get more companions, and sometimes he deals really well with it and sometimes it really starts to bug him. And that would be interesting with your dragon to go, oh gosh, I'm 6 riders in and I want to do this. I don't want to be bound to this
Mm-hmm.
person because they're just going to get old and die. So again, it's a different kind of story. So that's one of the joys, is that you can set up and say, this is the kind of story I want to tell. But you also have to know that's the kind of story you want to tell, and what audience do you have for that versus, or
Mm-hmm.
the young dragon rider going to the Dragon Academy and doing those things, which
Mm-hmm.
we know there's an audience for. So it's all about audience and what is the story you want to tell.
So then that gives you another story of the dragon rider that's just seen too many riders. And it's like, that 100-yard stare, 1,000-yard stare, whatever, and it wants to go away. And then you could get like the chosen one almost that can pull it out of retirement kind of vibe for a
Hmm.
whole new story.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
yep, and that's fun
And then
too.
it's the old retired mercenary and the young kid. Yeah, that's a fun story.
Yeah.
But definitely different than the whole coming of age school growing together story.
I'm actually experimenting with some of these tropes in the series I'm working on. The whole Dragon Rider thing, it's a side plot for me. It's not part of the main story, but it's happening in the background. And that person that it's happening to is not one of my point of view characters. So it's all seen from everyone else's point of view. So it's something I'm going to be experimenting with, just seeing where that goes.
Okay. I don't know. I like the idea. I haven't written it myself, but it'd be fun to do at some point. Right now, my latest obsession is mecha. I mean, sometimes boys never grow up, but dragons are cool too. And I've just been thinking, like, what about a
Dragon versus
dragon
mecha.
that had a mecha driving on top of it? I'm like, ooh, that might actually hurt the dragon. And then you think like most mecha is like 2 stories, 3 stories tall, and then I'm like, well, how much bigger would the dragon have to be? It gets complicated.
Well, wait, why don't you just have a mecha dragon?
Terry,
you
I think
go.
I love you. That is awesome.
There it is.
You're welcome.
like change shapes all Transformer style. I don't know why.
Transformers have the Dinobots. You
Yeah?
could get. I kind of think they had
That's true.
a dragonish kind of thing at one point. Or I have
Yeah.
to look it up, but
Power Rangers did too. So there we go. We got our
you
answer.
make it happen.
So
Yep.
do you like, or you think it's necessary for the dragon rider and the dragon to have a romantic pairing, or do you think that's just another level that's not required?
Not required. Cool if it happens. Yeah, doesn't need to though.
What about you, Janice?
Definitely not required. But then I'm like, I don't. Romantic relationships always fall to like the bottom of my list of relationships in books. So, like the opposite of the romance. So I do like, I find the friendship or some kind of bond or a mentor and a mentee, like all these different relationships I would pick first if I were writing it before a romantic one. But I know that I am in the minority when it comes to that, because there's a lot of romance with dragons out there that is just so beloved.
Yeah, I don't know. Like if I would, I could see more like the same, go for similar, but obviously the dragon would be sentient and the horse would not, but almost a similar dynamic that people have with like their war chargers back in the day that they'd go jousting on or whatever, like that bond of someone who sees danger with you, which is, I guess, more brotherly or siblingy, I guess, because you don't really need genders in this situation, because who cares if, that rider is stronger because you got a dragon. Like it's a great equalizer.
Well, and in
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, Daenerys was their mother. It was
Yeah.
a child mother kind of relationship. So I don't think that it has to be romantic. I think there's times for it. Like I say, dragon shifters are in romance are very popular, but a lot of classic fantasy, you have more of that. They're brothers. They're the other half of each other. It's not necessarily a romantic thing, and because you can have dragons that are not intelligent in that way, that really makes romance
Weird.
bizarre. Yeah.
Yes.
Again,
Yeah.
Daenerys looked at them as her children, and they were not telepathic or intelligent in that way. They were able to take commands from her, and this, that, and the other. But you never got there was not speech or telepathy or whatever. And we see those where it's a more powerful horse. It's definitely a more powerful bond, but it's not romantic.
So speaking of
That
that,
whole mother, go ahead.
go
The
no,
whole
go ahead.
mother-child relationship was so interesting too, because like at what point were her dragons going to grow out of adolescence into their own adulthood and not need a mother to tell them, right? At what point were they going to stop obeying? Like it was just a really interesting dynamic as the dragons grew older, like that relationship and all the different tensions that could come. Were they going to keep obeying her, or at some point were they just going to be like fly the nest, right, and head out on their own?
And I think that's why we always in the news when you see people that take pets that are like apex predators. So like I'm gonna be friends with this bear or this mountain lion, and then sometimes it works out okay and it stays friends with you, and sometimes you read horrific stories on the news. But the reason those are so shocking to us is the idea of like, well, you knew what was going to happen. It's an apex predator. Why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
But when it works, it's
Mhm.
so cool, and I think that's what's compelling about those stories is there's that inherent danger, but the end result
Mhm.
is cooler on the other end.
Yeah.
So, do you have a preference for like the communication where they be it nonverbal and non-sentient, more just like animal but slightly smarter, where they can talk, where they can, and don't even get me started on the vocal cords, or where the mental communication? Do you have a preference?
The vocal cords thing is exactly why I prefer telepathy, because
Mhm.
like Terry says, there's a point where my brain stops when I'm trying to with the mouth and the this, that, and the other. In the old
There's
Dungeons
no.
and Dragons cartoon, they would have Tiamat speak, and it always kind of blew my brain just a little bit, because it's like the workings of the jaws and the tongue in order to it never worked real well for me. So I always kind of liked the telepathy or some kind of a mental connection, but
Mhm.
you can make the other work as long as you don't think hard about it.
I made the mistake of watching
Agreed.
a video where somebody who's like a speech expert and they do that kind of stuff started like taking various vocal cords of various creatures and be like, oh, could this thing make any kind of language out of it? Because they were talking about both the fantasy and then the historic peoples. And once you start thinking about that, it kind of ruins the fun. So then, like you, I try not to.
Yep, just turn it off. Turn
Mhm.
the brain off. Hand wave them. As long as I'm willing to give them my disbelief, then they can say that the dragons are speaking. I just never think about the mechanics of it, because it gets
Mhm.
weird.
You just wave your magical sparkle fingers and you just like la la la, it works.
Hand
Mhm.
wave them.
What about the issue of language barriers? Because in some respect, if a creature's been around that long, it probably has a language that might not be spoken anymore. In some, there's obviously communication issue, and in others, it's like, well, of course, everyone speaks the same language. So, do you have a preference in the way a story is told in that respect?
No,
I don't
just
know
make
that I
it
have
fun.
a preference. Yeah. I
Go, go.
I don't know that I have a preference, but I do think I like when they add the added detail that if you're going to talk to a dragon, it's not going to talk necessarily like your best friend that you grew up with. Like I feel like if it's a whole different species, there should be different things that they talk about and care about and think about, and even the ways. So just the communication with them, I do like it. It's not totally essential, but I do like it when you can tell it's not a human that you're talking to, that there's something different about in how it presents itself.
Okay.
Lindsay Buroker in her Death Before Dragons, he's kind of an arrogant snot brain, And so the dragon's whole thing is he introduces himself, and it's Lord, and she looks at him and goes, "Yeah, I'm just gonna call you," and gives him a short name. And he looks at her like, that is the most you can't. And she's like, "Yep, that's the way it is. I am just calling you by this 5-letter name because it's the only way that we're going to get through this." And and he brings up that I would explain this to you in dragon, but it's far too complex and beautiful a language for a plebeian like you to understand. And since it's urban fantasy and that whole snarky relationship is really kind of one of the tropes of the genre, that's a really fun way that they deal with the language thing, is to say, of course we have a dragon language, but you are only human and you'd never understand it anyway. So we will deign to speak in the lower language of the humans. And so I think that can be really fun to at least acknowledge that, yeah, they probably have different ways that they communicate with each other, but then to roll with it so that it's easier for the reader.
And bonus points because Lindsay's an Army vet, so Army Girl made good. I like it.
Lindsay's amazing. Her books are great. Death Before Dragons is an amazing series.
I do like, this would give me, like, one of the common tropes for dragons is obviously the horde. They collect things, and it might not be the same for every dragon, but they collect stuff. I mean, if you're going to live a really long time, you get bored, you want trinkets. Does that work? That trope work, do you think, when you talk about dragon riders? Because now they're going to be moving around probably a lot more. They might not have a central cave, whatever, to collect stuff.
They're two completely different stories for me.
Me too. I was curious what everyone else thought.
Yeah. Although I will say, though, I am a fan of those, like, comic dragons that pop up on like Facebook or Pinterest every now and again, of the weird hordes dragons could have, like a horde of science equipment or a horde of VHS tapes or just really weird things that you wouldn't think a dragon would hoard, but there they are.
My kids love this series I think it's called Dragon Slippers, and I do believe it's called that because I think the dragon hoards shoes. And like, yeah, they love it. And yeah, but it's like a really fun take on the things they might get attached to. I mean, we don't all collect gold. I mean, I would, I guess, if there was enough around to collect, but.
Well, and I read one where every place that they went, the dragon wanted something. And it wasn't specifically gold or whatever. And so they got into is visiting the bazaars, and they would get ribbons, and they would get little necklaces, and they would get, other shiny things that would be attached to the dragon. And I wish I could remember the name of the series. I'll try to figure it out. But it got really, really funny because it was we have to go and do this thing. And it's like, but there's a bazaar over there, and I don't have a thing from this place yet. It's like, we'll get the thing from the place later, but the thing, focus. So there's some fun ways that you could play that. But yes, it's hard to carry a large horde hither and yon if you're going to be moving about.
I mean, since we're talking dragons, I mean, this might even make you want to drink coffee, Jana. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
No, but see, I do drink a brewable hot cocoa. That it's cocoa nibs, and you grind it down, and then you run it through a machine like that. Works beautifully. I would totally make hot cocoa with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
there's
cool.
There's this one too. It's black, but I just wasn't as big of a
shiny one.
Yeah, I like it too. Like, I saw that as a joke in Katie Cross's witchery group, and I'm like, that's got to be out there somewhere. And I found out where you can buy them if you've just got $1,000 laying around. And I'm starting to think, I do have a credit card. Like, maybe grown-ups.
And then reported as fraud to be like, there's no way I would have spent $1,000 on that. Someone else must have stolen my card.
Don't listen to this podcast. What? I have no idea what you're talking about. This is hypothetical. But yeah, it just amuses me, the idea of the dragon hoarding dragon stuff, like actual dragon merch.
That would be cool.
Yeah, actually, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
And now you know what you'd be brewing your tea or coffee to drink with the dragon out of.
Yeah. Well, and maybe you could have a home base where it's like, okay, this is where I keep my stuff, and they go fly off and they have adventures, and they come back and stick things in their messy closet, and so you could make it work with the horde.
Okay. Have any of you guys written Dragon Riders yet? And if the answer is no, do you plan on it? We're gonna go with you first, Terry.
Like I said, I'm kind of playing with that idea. That relationship between that character and the dragon is starting off with the dragon being basically a baby. And there's lore attached to that that I'm not going to get into right now. But eventually, that is the plan that this character will be riding this dragon at some point. Somebody else may be riding this dragon at some point as well. We'll see where that goes. See if he survives, like other characters that I didn't expect to survive at this point in the book.
That
That's a
happens
separate
sometimes.
problem.
What about you, Jenna?
I have written Dragon Riders in some short pieces. I have a plan for a series that will eventually rise to the top of the writing list that takes place in Arizona. So it's more of an urban fantasy, and there will be Dragon Riders in that one. I have edited a lot of Dragon Riders. Melissa McShane, who we see on here fairly frequently, she has one called The Dragons of Mother Stone, and that's the series name. And it's a 4-book series, and it's Dragon Riders, and it is awesome. It's secondary world fantasy, but it's got the feeling of being in like India is kind of that setting they've drawn across. So it's a really unique setting, and I love what she did with her dragons. So I've edited a bunch.
Okay. What about you, Janice? I know you've written dragons, but have you written dragon riders?
Yeah. No dragon riders, but my dragons are more smog. Like they wouldn't let you. They would just kill you. Oh, that's not true. Actually, one guy did kind of like magically take control of a dragon, and he did ride it, and everyone was just sort of stunned because that's not what happens with dragons in the world. So he was a villain, if that helps. I don't know.
Okay. Do you plan on trying that at some point, or are you happy just to read them?
I'm just happy to read them. A lot of my stuff happens in the same world. I'd have to do like some massive world building changes to end up with the dragon that could be written. So I think that's ruled out for as long as I write in the world that I'm in.
Okay, that works. I haven't written it. I mean, it'd be kind of cool to do it at some point, but my dance card is kind of full for a while. Got a few open contracts, and they're kind of like, "Hey, yo, JR, you owe us some books." So
Right,
I have to like turn the brain off on new ideas for a little bit, just so they don't like actually show up at my front door with like contracts and guns and stuff. You know how that goes, publishers.
Oh, I was going to say torches and pitchforks, but that's fun too.
Yeah, they might do that as well. When you write for a publishing company that's got 2 veterans that own it, like all bets are off. I'm just saying they'll reach out and touch somebody.
I'm old fashioned. What can I say?
But it does work for the dragon conversation though, since a lot of that's fantasy, like pitchforks and torches. And I can dig it. Yeah, but anyway, we're gonna go far afield if I start thinking along a new story idea you gave me. And anyway, it's all your fault, Terry. It's all your fault.
You're welcome.
Yeah, she's happy about it.
So last question, because Jana put it in the comments, and now I'm curious. So do you think that having a dragons and dragon riders, like how do you see that affecting like geopolitics in story terms? Like what kind of changes do you think that might make?
Go ahead, Jana. You first.
Well, I brought it up because it's things like, you think about Game of Thrones, and a dragon was such a significant power that it changed the entire course of a war, because her having those dragons made a significant difference to what could be done. It made a significant difference to who was the ruling house, who was the ruling party, because having dragons was like having the nuclear option. And then you think about Vern, and the dragon riders were a breed apart. There were expectations that they would be well treated, that they were going to be well taken care of. The towns and cities would give them tithes in order to take care of them, because the dragon riders rode out against threat and they protected them, and they had all those things. So there's a lot of times when we get into this, because of the nature of dragons that we talked about, when you get dragon riders, you almost immediately get some kind of a societal stratification that falls around this ability to do this. I mean, even go to How to Train Your Dragon, it changes who Hiccup is and how people relate to him when he is riding these dragons and training other people how to do it. So that's why I brought the question up, is that I don't think you can be a dragon rider and have that just be a normal, oh yes, I'm also the miller's daughter, but I happen to have a dragon out back. So that was my thought on bringing that discussion point up.
And sound like a broken record here, but the inheritance cycle, the dragon riders initially were the peacekeepers of the world, and then when that went into chaos, the whole world went to chaos, essentially. So absolutely, that's going to affect the geopolitical map.
I think they lend themselves so much to a military option or just a military power, even if they're being peacekeepers or they're just doing other things. Like, you're not going to be the person who pisses off all the dragon riders because they're gonna win. Like, unless you have something else that can also fight dragon riders. Like, they seem like they're the power in whatever society they're a part of.
Well, unless it's the bad guy, because there's some there's a Chinese show that I watched called Till the End of the Moon, and in that case, you've got the bad guy is on a dragon, and so your good guys are having to figure out, oh, he's riding a that, and oh, this is bad, and that also ties into again that those politics and those politics of power of whoever controls the dragon, whoever controls this kind of thing, is going to have a power that other people don't. And that dragon riding is, that's an interesting story to tell, is how does that change society? What happens if it's the bad guy versus the good guys? All those kind of neat things.
Yeah.
I almost feel like that one needs its own episode, so I'm going to put a pin on that one because I do think there are a lot of implications of that would be fun to dive into as we just think world building live.
Politics and religion too, I think.
Yes.
They can
go
into that.
Great point.
Yeah, I think that could be handled in the same. I get more broadly how having a dragon and dragon riders might affect the culture would cover both, I think. So
good podcast. Make it so.
I'm gonna have to book that one too, and we'll have to see if we can get Sarah back because she likes dragons too. And maybe after soccer season we can get Katie because she's our resident dragon person. She occasionally sends me messages. I'm like, hey JR, have you written a dragon yet? She's like poking me, trying to make me convert. It's like her religion. So, all right.
You can't say no to Katie.
No, she kind of scares me a little bit. Not gonna lie. All right.
Yeah.
Janice, first off, what are you writing now? And then how can listeners and viewers at home find you?
I'm in the middle of the third trilogy in the same world with all the keepers. Just epic, really kind of a classic feel to epic fantasy. And everyone can find me at jaandrews.com, or everything's available on Amazon, or every book has an audiobook too. So they can be found on Audible also.
And is that a map of your world behind you?
It is. Right now, the current book is like up here, there. That's where we are.
See, I kind of have a thing for maps, so I'm going to try to control myself doing it. We did a whole episode on it because I like them so much.
I love maps. They're great.
Maps are awesome.
Yeah.
See, I want to make one for the worlds I'm doing, but I'm like, I know I'll lose like a year just learning the map making program and then doing it. Okay, write the words.
Incarnate. That's where you want. You want incarnate. It's awesome.
Yep. I use it for D&D all the time.
I've heard that one, and Wonder Something was another good one for maps. I'll have to check it out. Anyway, Jana, before I get myself distracted, what are you writing now? And then how can listeners and viewers find you?
Listeners and viewers can find me at opalkingdompress.com, or I'm on Amazon and Facebook and all of the places under Jana S. Brown and under Jenna Ray and under we don't talk about that one on here. Oh wait, yes we do. Under Jadlyn Asher. I am currently in between projects, which is a really weird place for me because I have finished this and now I'm an idea fairy person, so I have like 32 different things that I have basic outlines and stuff for, and they're all vying for my attention, and I must have it decided by the beginning of next week. So wish me luck, boys and girls. We're going in tomorrow.
No pressure.
None.
Okay. And what about you, Terry? What are you writing now? And then what are you narrating now, since you do both? And then how can they find you?
Right now, I am still in the process of outlining the third book in my In Progress series. Narrating, I am on the second Nightshade book by J.F. Posthumous. And as for where you can find me, I am occasionally found on the Facebook, although I haven't been as active lately because work is nuts. But I'm there sometimes. sharing memes, usually.
That I shamelessly steal from. She's one of my
Of
sources.
course. I
'Cause
steal
that's
yours
what you
too,
do with
so it's
memes.
fair.
You know, yeah, I mean that's the whole point. It's meant to be stolen. It's like piracy, right? It's just but the cool kind.
Arr.
So let's see. I
Dragon
am
pirates.
yeah. Ooh.
Mhm.
Oh, now what would that
There's
sound
something
like?
there.
All right, stop.
That's it. That's all about
Everybody stop. All right.
booty. The
So
meme horde.
that would be a cool paranormal, like, or what a modern fantasy. Is that what paranormal is, right?
Contemporary fantasy.
Contemporary fantasy. There we go. Like a dragon that hoards memes. And then if
I
you
love
like
it.
share their meme without like crediting them, they like show up at your house. That could be hilarious.
There you go. That could be your Mecha Dragons horde memes.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
You're
So
welcome again.
So we've talked about this for the last while. The Wargate series, that's the Curse Brigade modern striker unit. They get sucked into Fantasy Egypt. Well, modern-ish, because they disappeared around the time I was active. So all the tech that I used, it uses. The army's changed too much since I got out to bother relearning all that stuff. So I'm working on that. The first book is done. It's been through all the editing. James was very much a pantser and working on multiple projects at once. And I'm finding that doesn't work for me. So I'm going back to what worked when I was writing like 3,000 words a day. So I am in the process this week. I have outlined all of the words that we have written, and now I am in the process of writing the outline for the end of book 2 and book 3. So I know where I'm going. And then from there, the Power of Dragon nuance dictation program is going to be my friend. So I'm working on that one. And then the fantasy one that James and I were working on that he's talked about a couple times. His family has reached out, so it looks like we might be able to get contracts covered to finish it. So we'll have to see if the numbers are our friend, what we can do with that. And, you know, partly to finish it because it's his legacy. So as a friend, I'd want to do that and then send the money, you know, some of it to his family would be pretty cool too. So that is the plan going forward with the writing. And with that, you can find us if you wanted to track us and you don't already know where we are. And if you don't, like, what's really wrong with you? Come on, you're already listening. But we are on Linktree at linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things: the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the Twitters, the email, Blasters and Blades podcast at gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page linked to the Linktree. We have Madam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitters, and the emails. She's sad she couldn't come talk about dragons today, but her computer just was not her friend. But it's linked over there, and you can send her all of the shenanigans. She is there for it. But when she makes you cry, we will point and laugh. Our website, now that Anchor.fm has been bought out by Spotify, and it's all a gobbledygook address, that is also linked on the Linktree, so you don't have to remember it, because I don't either. But on that website, or at Spotify, you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on. Every dollar helps, and we appreciate these shows are not free to produce. Or you can support us more directly over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section this for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until they can talk to dragons themselves. And if you use the link for the Coffee Brand Coffee, you can get 10% off Podcast Grunts, and maybe you too can commune with the dragons. I'm not saying it's got a lot of caffeine, but I'm not saying it either for legal purposes. All right, people? Check it out. You be the judge. It gives me the jitters. I love it. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thank you, ladies, for coming on. Thank you, Sarah. We're sorry your internet didn't like you. Starlink was not your friend today, but we will link to her as well. So check out her books, check out Janice's books, check out Janice's books, and buy everything Terry has navigated and narrated. That too. I mean, you might navigate for them, but, you know, check out their stuff. We appreciate it. And with that, boom, we're out.